Morning, afternoon, depending on where you are in the globe. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us live today. We have a good audience to listen to Erica. This is a very special occasion for all of us because a lot of us as South Africans enjoy sport. I am Sharon Constanson. I'm chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce that is based in the UK, and we link into many of our sister chambers throughout the globe, and we have many chapters of our own chamber that are global as well, and we've got people from all of these environments working with us. Erica and I did something quite interesting the other day. She and I both participated in the virtual London Marathon, which was a really interesting experience for us because she was doing it in the south of Greece and I was doing it in the south of Spain. And we were the two European components for the virtual London Marathon. And the wonderful thing is we had people in Australia, in Asia, in Canada, and South Africa, and in the UK, and in one of the Channel Islands as well, and Mauritius. So we had a good contingent of 5 of the big continents and a few other of the islands around the world, actually competing to raise funds for charity for South Africans. And what Erica is going to share with us today is why she runs, what's important about running, and the high she gets from it. Now, just before the virtual London Marathon, she had done some epic distance across the Sahara Desert, which I'm sure she'll tell you more about as well. So I do believe Erica has joined us. So welcome, Erica. Would you like to tell us about you, your book, why you run?
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with running.
That's,
over to you.
Those are a lot of good questions. I just have to say on London Marathon, a huge congratulations, because I was incredibly impressed that you finished that distance, given the terrain. I mean, it was like running in lockdown with a cliff.
it was tough. Oh my goodness me.
Yeah,
but
really hard.
Isn't that what South Africans are made of as people? We've got such grit. And I mean, everybody around said, "You're mad. It's a circumstance. Just don't do it." I said, "No, God, that's not an option. It's not an option."
It's quite extraordinary. I think South Africans have something really, really special. I'll introduce myself in a second, but I think this is a very good preamble because, you know, if you think about it, we have the biggest ultra marathon in comrades in the world. We have the biggest marathon distance cycle race in the world, the Argus, or it's now called the Cape Town Cycle Tour. We have the biggest open water swim in the world in the Memoir Dam. So it's quite extraordinary that South Africans as a nation and across all cultures, because none of these sports are exclusive in any way, and across cultures we gravitate in a way towards this extremity, which is, I find it very interesting. I've just spent 3 weeks in Greece writing my next book, and on the island where I stayed, the entire population of Europe was represented. I was the only person running. I mean, only. On the entire island, I was the only person who still had a regular running practice. So Sharon, just to your question, my name is Erica Terblanche. I don't quite know who the audience is exactly, but to introduce myself, I would say there are maybe 4 main aspects. I worked in corporate strategy and change for 25 years. Up to board and exco level. So I really understand the challenges, especially now that we are facing in corporates with accelerated change. At the same time, I was fascinated by human motivation and what really drives us as people. So I studied psychology, I got a degree in psychology, and then still not satisfied that it gives us the answer to the performance factor and how we make the very best of our life. I did a master's degree in positive psychology. And then over the past 10 years, I've been running 2 businesses, Teach a Girl to Fish and Thrive Guru, that I both started to help people bring together corporate life, work life, and the skills and the science of how we make the very most of our precious life. And then in parallel to that, I wanted to test these things, and I wanted to taste it in the fire of, you know, where the science will have to really show up to prove itself beyond the test lab. So I've been doing endurance sport at a very high level for the past 23 years. And so in South Africa, I was South Africa's top adventure racing woman. And those disciplines, you basically, for about 5 years, in that discipline, you don't sleep for 5 days and 5 nights. So what you and I did with the London Marathon, you do that, and then after that, you do it again, and then you do it one more time, and then one more time. And then straight after that, you do 7 Arguses continuously without stopping. Then you swim the mile maybe 10 times. And then you start all over again with what you and I did. And you do it again 7 times. And then you do Argus again 5 times. And then you swim mile again. And then you paddle the Doozy Marathon and the Breeder Marathon all in one. And then you sleep for the first time for 2 hours.
What?
So that's what I'm writing my next book about. So that was it.
So is this a genuine event?
Do you know, this is a genuine sport, and it's so obscure, Sharon, because such a small handful of people do it, and you do all those distances obviously in the wilderness while self-navigating, using old school map and compass. You're not allowed to use a GPS. So the factor of uncertainty, you don't know, maybe it's going to take the same as 6 Arguses, maybe it'll just be 3, maybe it'll be 14. Who knows what you never know. And obviously you all the time worried about whether you're actually heading down the right gorge or down the right road, and what I've seen people do in those states of exhaustion, the decisions that people make to save 5 kilometers on their feet, the life-threatening decisions. So like once we came to the Lesotho, to the Orange River in Lesotho, and it was in flood. And we had the alternative of hiking 20 kilometers extra. We'd been on our feet for 3 days and 3 nights, or we could swim this river. At this point, logs were being washed down. I mean, trees came, and you know our rivers in South Africa. When they're in flood, they get orange and angry with those massive waves. And a bunch of logs entire trees were swept down the river. And shortly after that, a lowing cow came past. And then the front, one of the members of our team, at the thought of 20 kilometers extra, looked at this raging monster of water and leapt in and started swimming across. And the rule in adventure racing is you're in a team of 4, you do everything together. And like lemmings, one after the other. It was the closest maybe the second closest I've ever come to drowning in my life. But that was, but that's the next book. We're still on trail running. We're on Run for the Love of Life. And then after the adventure racing, I moved to London for 10 years and started trail running in the incredible resources that's available across the world in extreme distance trail running, and did that for 10 years.
Amazing, some of the things you've done. Tell us about the one that you did just before the marathon, because I chatted to you before you did it, yes. And I know we did the marathon together. How was that race, and what were the key features of that race that you remember?
Oh, gosh,
your most recent one.
I remember it in brutal detail. The Utah, it's a race run in Utah.
Oh, so, Utah, sorry, I misinformed the crowd. Guys, I do apologize. It wasn't the Sahara. Utah. Okay, I was wrong.
This particular one, my first race ever was in the Sahara race. So there you're absolutely right. But this particular race was run near the Grand Canyon. And so the features of this race, And maybe just to describe these races, they are typically 7 days long. You run 270, between 250 and 270 kilometers over the 7 days. You follow flags, so the course is marked, so that's nice. You also sleep at night, which is really also nice. But the only thing that makes these races quite difficult is that everything that you will consume and need during the 7 days has to be on your back. So if you're going to use a sleeping bag or a toothbrush, or wear clothing, or have sunscreen, toiletries, and every morsel of sustenance that you will put in your body, all your medicine, all your foot care, that you carry. So you typically run with anything between, the lightest pack on this particular race was 6 kilograms dry without water. That was my pack, because I'm absolutely, after 12 years of doing this sport, my skill is to pack the absolute bare necessities.
So you learn more than one skill. You learn how to pack. I think I must bring you to come visit me before I go on holiday.
But Sharon, I actually would love that, and drag you into an adventure.
No.
Yes, yes. It's actually much easier than people think. Once you are there and you put one foot in front of the other, it's a game of survival. And, and the heaviest pack on this particular race was about 14 kilograms, which is a massive mistake. You do not need it. You don't need it. You don't need it. And then what also makes this race very difficult is it's run at altitude, so above 2,500 meters. The days are extremely hot. We got up to 40 degrees Celsius. The nights are extremely cold. We got down to 0 degrees Celsius. So you've got this huge fluctuation, and then dealing with the effects of altitude sickness and all of that, because some of us, me included, start getting altitude sick at about 2,300 meters.
And so that's a little bit higher than Johannesburg, which is about 2,000 meters.
Well, Joey's is at 1.6.
1.6, okay. So another 1,000 almost, yeah. Yes.
The interesting thing is, if you live in Johannesburg, your body gets very acclimatized at that barometric pressure and oxygen availability. So when you come to a race, maybe 1,000 meters higher or 1,500, the adaptation for you is actually much easier. For a coastal person, and the UK also doesn't have much elevation, we suffer. We really, really struggle. So the race is at elevation. And then the course organizers have been renowned for trying to make this race one of the hardest on the calendar. Every race, some are the friendliest, some are the hardest, some are the driest, some are the hottest, some are the coldest or the most windy. But this particular Tess and Colin Geddes prize themselves in making the race as hard as possible. So what they do is they send you out on a 50 kilometer run on the first day with your 14 kilogram backpack. So it breaks people, and it's up. The elevation gain on this race was almost the same as climbing Everest over the 7 days. So it's all uphill, carrying this heavy pack at elevation. So they break you on the first day, then they give you an easier day, one easier day. So the next day is about 46 kilometers. All of this is over difficult terrain. Most of the terrain is deep, heavy sand or across gorse and very difficult bushy terrain. Just think treading on a carpet of cacti. So you're basically running across cacti for kilometers. But what they've done to make this race particularly hard is the long day. So on these 7-day races, there's also a 100-kilometer leg nonstop. So they make the 100-kilometer leg right in the middle. So people think, oh God, if I can just get through the long day, I'm okay. So people run the long day. The long day is technical. There's not a single 3 kilometer long easy track. It's all a big fight until the end. And then after the long day, you still have 3 ultra marathons that people don't think about. And before
I just can't get my mind around it.
Yeah, and so it's a really hard race. And then at the very last day should be an easy run because the field is sort of settled. the winner is not going to be, it's not going to change. But they make the very last day 12 kilometers with something like 2,000 meters elevation gain. That's sort of twice the height of Table Mountain from the sea. And so you have this 12-kilometer sprint finish up the Escalante staircase. So it's just really, really, really hard. And also because the race is now so hard, it attracts very, very tough competition. So you are out there, and also because the spirit is, you know, you get races where the spirit is all about the experience. This race is all about who wins. So you've got that intense competitive pressure, the elevation, the brutal course design. Also, if you need anything like foot strapping, they're extremely strict. They are just so strict. If you drop a piece of paper the size of a chappie paper, because everything has to have your name on it, you get an hour penalty. If you leave one small piece of paper, perhaps fell out of your pocket in the tent, you get a 2-hour penalty. So it's just, it's a very hard race. It's a hard race. It's a hard race. And
you still did our little marathon afterwards. Oh my goodness.
And I found our marathon very hard. I just really, honestly, I struggled so much on our virtual marathon. I stopped halfway. I had to have a Greek coffee because otherwise it was never been. I think I was exhausted still from Utah. But I did manage to come second, so I brought South Africa back.
Well done. Well done. Congratulations. And you talk about the 5 reasons why you run. Do you want to take us through that little piece of what's in your book? And maybe give us those 5 reasons, and maybe at some point in time you might be able to relate it back to a story, to a specific marathon or specific event as you talk through those, and give us the sort of the positioning of them in each case.
Fantastic. So Sharon, as I said, you know, for me, running is not just about the sport. It's not about putting one foot in front of the other. It's the psychology that supports it and that surrounds it. And what running gives to our lives in a way that we don't, you know, I don't know if people know this, but for half an hour after doing any kind of aerobic exercise, but running being sometimes the easiest thing you can do straight out of your office door, just put on a pair of trainers, go, that you are 300% more creative for 3 hours after doing any aerobic exercise. Another beautiful study showed that you're about 150% more productive for more or less the same period afterwards. So they also did the study on CEOs, and I think they tracked something like 4,000 CEOs over a period of, it was long, it was a longitudinal study. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 10 years. They tracked the CEOs and they tracked the performance of the companies. And what they found was that fit CEOs delivered 25% more shareholder value than non-fit CEOs. And I mean, it was a randomized sample, enormous longitudinal study with a very big sample. So the statistical significance of the impact it had when CEOs were fit was enormous. So running gives us much, much more than we actually think in life. So it makes us productive. So maybe let me start with perhaps the biggest reason why I run. And why I not just run, but why I run these ridiculous races in the desert. Because when you run with just a small little backpack on your back, it attenuates this incredible feeling of gratitude. It really helps us to become a lot more grateful for the things that we typically take for granted at home. You know, Sharon, on the Sahara race, you mentioned the Sahara race. Maybe also just to explain to people who've never seen or done a race like this. On a race like this, organizers every 10 to 15 kilometers put water out for people. There's a checkpoint. So the checkpoint has 2 purposes. The first purpose is to make sure that people don't die and wander off into the desert. The second purpose is to give us water because we cannot possibly carry enough water to sustain ourselves. And so when you are doing these races, even the smallest morsel of food, every drop of water, I mean, we do not spit out our toothpaste water in the morning. We swallow it because every single drop of water becomes so precious. And without water, obviously, you don't go very far. And so I'll never forget on this particular Sahara race, it was on a long day, and we were coming through the desert, and I could smell it as clearly as it had that sweet, dank smell. You can smell water. The other thing is, after many days of racing, you become a little animal-like, perhaps. Your instincts, your senses, everything is sharpened. And as we were coming over the dunes, I could smell water. And I thought I was going out of my mind. And of course, as we crested the dunes, there it was, an oasis. And it was just 3 or 4 date palm trees with a camel crib. And as I got to this camel crib, the Bedouin brothers who were watering their camels, looked at me and said to me, "You are welcome." And they invited me to get into that water. Honestly, it was a slimy little camel crib. It wasn't much bigger. I don't know. It was round actually. It wasn't quite a crib. It was round. And as I slipped into this dam, that feeling, the sensory overload, first of all, of getting into the water, my entire body broke out into goosebumps. But there was something so much more. It was this unbelievable appreciation of what we have in life as normal. And so I run these races because it really, really helps us to remember when we just click our fingers and open a tap and water gushes up. You know, when you come back and you get into your first shower after a desert run like that, you understand what great, enormous privilege we have in our life. You go to a bar, you say, "Can I have a beer?" The beer appears. The normal things in our lives get a hue of the magical around them because we actually see them for what they are. So that's the first reason, and it's really related to minimalism. So I don't know if you, in the introduction, I mentioned teach eagle to fish. So I run a adventure business in Greece, and we typically go on these 5-day expeditions, kayaking trips. And when people arrive at Mytilene Airport, I've already written the rules to them. I've emailed them before. And I said, on the kayak, you can take 2 shoe boxes worth of stuff for the 5 days. People don't believe me. They arrive with their trolley suitcases at Mytilene. When we get to the kayaks, I repeat the rule. You've got 2 shoe boxes worth of allocation for 5 days, no more. And people really look at me with their slight resentment, actually. Bit of resentment. And disbelief. At the end of those 5 days of kayaking, when we get back to Mytilene and they pick up their suitcases again, they look at the suitcases the same way, with the disbelief and the resentment slightly. Slightly. Now I have to lug this thing back home. But what possibly could be in there that I may need that I didn't already have for the 5 days? So there's this sense that we need so much less to be happy. And you viscerally, I mean, we all know it, we all say the words, but on these experiences, you viscerally experience it in your body. Then actually a little small backpack on my back, 7 kgs more or less for 7 days, 5 days on a kayaking trip, 2 shoe boxes full will do me well. You know, and people come back from those experiences and they put away the Louis Vuitton bags for a little while. Nothing wrong with looking beautiful and elegant, but there's a freedom from it. So when people choose to turn themselves out well, it's a choice and they feel good into it, but it's not an obligation. It's not we don't need so much. So that's the first reason why I really love running in these races. The second reason is a lot around camaraderie, because now when you have only 2 shoe boxes of stuff, or only the same pair of clothing for 7 days, and you've got these white saltpeter streaks down your body, because we don't bath, obviously, for 7 days. We sweat together, we stink together, we're in these small tents, 8 people.
You even swim across the Orange River together.
Yes, exactly.
With the cow.
So adventure racing got me into this feeling of the camaraderie on these extreme events. And in the running, when we do these 7-day runs, you sit all day long. So now you've run for 7, 8, 9, whatever hours. The rest of the time, you put your feet up and you eat your morsels of food and you talk and you connect. You know, and on these races, you connect in ways. You tell strangers things that it'll take you years before you tell a friend something like this back at home, because we strip to the core. We strip to the essence of ourselves. There's no title, there's no hierarchy. We barely know what anybody else does back at home. We don't have mirrors, which is the interesting thing. There is quite something, you know, after these 7 days, you see yourself for the first time after 7 days, and one is quite surprised by the person who is there. So in the desert, we get much more directly connected. The facades drop, the veneer, the stuff we need in daily life, perhaps don't always need, but it drops away when you stink and sweat together for 7 days. So
you talk about it as being authentic connection is the word that you've used. So what you've just described now is the authenticity of me without all my accoutrements and everything else that I've got added.
You know, exactly. And it's very interesting when you've said it beautifully, when the authentic connection happens like that. I just also see at the same time, it's almost directly relational. The judgment goes down. And the grace, you know, and the appreciation goes up. It's a liminal space. Sometimes I wish I can pick up the experience of these 7-day races. By the way, the more competitive the environment, the less that happens.
I would totally imagine. It's not about group, it's about me. And that psychology changes.
Absolutely. And then it pulls you into the vortex of the ego, and it pulls you away from the others. It pulls you away from the experience. It pulls you away from the immersion and from nature, really. So it was very interesting for me running Utah again, because I've run it before. They invited me to come back. So there was something very interesting for me in the way that we live our lives in a very competitive way, and how that sometimes cuts us off from the very things that make life worthwhile. I mean, maybe just a little segue to the biggest finding probably on the causes of human happiness. So I don't know if you know about the Grant study. It's the longest ever study on human well-being and human happiness. So the central question is, what are the things that really make us happy? What makes for a worthwhile life? And the study it started in the 1930s with a cohort of 450 Oxford students. Of course, they were all male, so there is some slight, because there were no female students then, but so there's some slight biases. But I think what came out of this study holds for humankind. And the biggest finding after, almost 80 years of the longest study ever on human happiness, was this one finding: that the biggest predictor whether you will be alive and healthy and self-report a satisfying and fulfilling and a happy life, and whether you will all these three things when you were 85, the single biggest predictor for that was the quality of your human relationships throughout life. You know? And
yes, I can get that totally.
Completely. But yet, even we know this, we know it. And yet when you go on to some races, it's more important to win and set yourself apart from the group than it is to have this camaraderie. I think of my own career life. How often have I prioritized a work trip over spending time with my family. Do you know? So we know these things, yet we strangely set our lives up quite differently. So it's interesting. It's interesting. The third reason why I love running is, and I think we've already alluded to that a little bit, but it's because physiologically, it brings you to a place of higher performance. End of, full stop. If you don't run, or if you don't do some form of moving your body, your productivity, your output, your creativity is at a lower level. This is a magic trick to just lift your performance. And I think there's more than that. So when you did your run in Italy, and every single time you got to that cliff and you had to turn around and run 350 meters and turn around again, every single time we do this, we get to a place of where challenge, it gives us that golden doorway where we can choose to face the challenge, embrace it, and step over into the place of our higher potential. Every time you hit the wall, literally in your case, many times over again. But you get an opportunity. Running is it's a very artful, it's a chisel, and it cuts away at us, and it really shapes us. And over time, it actually changes how we show up in the world. It changes our character, it changes our perseverance, it changes our commitment, it changes our resilience, our willpower.
And also our physical shape, our strength, our muscles. It's not just this muscle, it's these muscles, core muscles, your leg muscles. They also are going to look very different, stronger, and will last the journey to well beyond 85. Come on, that's still way too young.
Completely. And I mean, our bodies is the only way with which we engage with the world. It is the only vessel with which we can have the experience of our life. It is more important than anything to be fit. I really, really believe that. So whatever you do to get fit, it's really, so that's the other reason why. So this chiseling of our bodies and of our minds. And the fourth reason why I run a lot in these deserts is because of the extreme nature connection that it gives us. So on one
you make the comment about children today, in today's day and age. There was a thing that occurred in my family about, it must be going on 28 odd years ago. Yeah. And my sister-in-law saw a pod of peas. So there's a pod with peas in it. And I broke the pod open and she saw the peas. She said, I didn't know peas came in a pod. And that was 28 odd years ago. And she was an adult. And I thought, goodness. Wow. And that's just a tiny example of how you don't know where things come from. It doesn't come from polystyrene in the fridge.
And actually that piece of meat used to be a living animal, a cow. That is a cow. Yeah. That is a little pig. That, by the way, is a little lamb that we're going to eat right now. Do you want to see what it looks like in real life? Now, the research shows us that children are 8 times more likely to be on a device of some sort. 8 times more likely to be on a device of some sort indoors than outside playing.
Oh, I'm surprised the stats are actually that low. I would have put them higher.
Perhaps they never go outside anymore. Yeah. Dr. Richard Love talks about, he's really worth following. He talks about nature deficit disorder. And the fact that if you look at the massively rising levels of ADHD, depression, obesity amongst kids, massive escalations, and the curve is steepening. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Dr. Richard Love's hypothesis is it is because children are umbilically disconnected from nature, because they don't have that. You know, our generation still played outside.
We still
grew
ate
up
stones and sand and
and
played
sand
with mud pies and dug
in the
holes.
mud. Exactly. We sat in we know how it feels to be in nature. Children nowadays don't. You know, I often do work at schools, and I work with the teachers, and then I work with the kids. So, and in one of my courses, I talk about nature connection as one of the elixirs of living a well-lived life. Helps us to restore much faster. The Japanese do forest bathing. Those executives have been doing it for the past 50 years. It's nothing new. They take the executives into the forest for 2 days, a digital disconnect, and make them walk in the forest for 2 days. That's it. And then that helps people against depression, anxiety, burnout, etc. So where was I with the
nature connection, nature deficit? Yes. That was our reason for.
Exactly. So that I was telling you about the workshops that I do. And yes. So when people come in, I do this nature connection. And I know when people come in, many, especially if people are mostly urban living and they of a younger generation, there's slight eye rolling and people like, okay, right, let's do this nature connection. I really much prefer the one on nutrition or on mental resilience, but we'll humor you. So then we do a meditation or a visioning exercise where I ask people to think about their special place in their life. And people say, what do you mean by my special place? I say, the place you would go to if you could, just your special place. What do you see there? What do you feel there? What's the sensation on your skin? What do you hear? Are there people? How do you feel in this place? You know, Sharon, never in 20 years of work has anybody described New York. Nobody has ever described Oxford Street. Nobody. People talk about shade next to a burbling brook, lying under a tree, looking at the dappled shade. They talk about the sound of water. They talk about the sound of the ocean. They talk about the wind in the trees and birds. And when people come out of that visioning exercise, I get goosebumps even when I think about it, because I can feel the awakening in the room. And very often, the weekend later, I see the guy with his entire family, not just his kids and wife, but the extended uncles and aunts, and they are climbing on Table Mountain because he felt it and he wants to give it to his kids. Amazing. So that's the other, you know, and I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll tell a quick story about this nature connection. On one race in the Namib Desert, I was running with a group, and then the group got spread out. So you run in the desert alone for kilometers on end, not a human being in sight in this desert. And you know, the Namib has those red dunes, oldest dunes in the world, soft, silky sand, and these extraordinary old trees that can't decompose because it's too dry. So you've got these skeleton trees. Anyway, in somewhere out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. And obviously you have a fright because I have nearly been eaten many times in my life, too many times. But I saw something, and it was a beautiful old Blesbok bull. Yes, they sort of human height. Maybe you can't
imagine they can live in the desert, and they're so big. No, the springboks in the Namib are huge.
They're big and they're fat. They're quite round. And this brown animal with this striking, and what makes the Blesbok very memorable is they've got the striking marks, white, dazzling, like they're going to a fancy dress. Anyway, he looked at me, and I spotted him. And then, of course, I thought he was going to dash off. He was about 80, 90 meters away from me, less than 100 meters. And he looked at me, and instead of running off into the wilderness, he started trotting alongside me.
Really?
I couldn't believe it. In parallel, next to me. And then, because he was a longer legs, Blesbok bull, he pulled slightly ahead of me. And then I thought he was going to take his leave. He stopped and he waited for me. And when I got parallel with him, he looked at me and he started trotting again alongside me. This carried on for probably about 10 minutes, long. And, you know, Sharon, in that moment of running with that old blessed bull, because, you know, when they are alone, they've been kicked out of the herd. So I don't know if he was lonely. I don't know why he ran with me. Maybe I was lonely. I was going through a divorce at the time.
They could feel that mental connection.
There was a definite, and I didn't make it up. I didn't try and make it soppy. There was a connection between me and this bull.
I have felt it once with a dolphin, a massive, big bottlenose dolphin. And you're walking along the beach, and the beach is quite steep. So if you're walking right on the edge, a meter away, it's 2 meters deep already. Well, that's a big wasp.
That is a bee. The bees are, no, he's connecting. Don't worry.
And out of nowhere would come this 3 meter sized mammal and would swim at exactly the same pace that I'm walking for 2-3 miles. And you think, why? Why do you do that? And you know when that dolphin's going to come and join you on the days you need the company. So I totally align to what you're saying.
Where did that happen? Where did that happen?
On Hilton Head Island, which is off the east coast of America, just off South Carolina. And you walk around the bottom of the island, and this dolphin would often sometimes bring the family, but most of the time it was just the one. And it was quite an incredible experience. Yeah, it came back a number of times.
Oh my God, that is
so
incredible.
I'm with you.
And they are magical. The dolphins they have a healing property. I don't know what it is about them, but they are very so that's the fifth reason why. So it seems you don't have to run. You can actually just walk on the beach. But okay. I mean, I
do marathons, but not the way you do them. What's your sixth? What's the sixth one?
The fifth reason why I run, and I think this is important, and perhaps this is why Annette wanted us to share this. Mm-hmm. The statistics on exercise and depression. Mm-hmm. We know that being fit and regularly exercising, we know about all the mental and physical benefits of it. We know the correlations with lower diabetes, lower heart problems. We know those things. Even certain cancers, if you fit, have much lower probability. But I think what people don't know is how profoundly important exercise is for mental health.
Yes.
In positive psychology, Sharon, we don't talk about exercise as an antidepressant. We actually say that if you do not exercise, it is a depressant. It's the other way around. We are made to move. And specifically in South Africa, but maybe just let me say, the research on exercise and depression is incredible. There's a study, and it had a large number of people that were clinically diagnosed with depression. And then they split these into one group got Zoloft. I think it was Zoloft. Yes, it was Zoloft, but a Schedule 6 antidepressant, very effective. Another third of the group had an exercise condition. So they got 3 times a week, 30 minutes of aerobic exercise. The third group got nothing. They were the control group. After 6 weeks, the southeaster is just completely, I don't know, can you still hear me okay?
I can hear you. I've heard that it's quite a wind today.
It's hectic. It's just arrived. It's just spilled over into Sea Point, I think. But when you look at the research results of this, a third of the exercise in the Zoloft group had the same level of remission after 6 weeks. So the recovery was slightly slower on the exercise. It was quicker on the Zoloft. But after 6 weeks, the improvement was similar in both conditions and quite good. Both were quite effective. Here's the kicker, the interesting thing. 6 months later, people continued their regimes. 6 months later, the relapse rate with Zoloft was 62%. The relapse rate with exercise, 23%.
Good.
In South Africa, we have the 9th highest suicide rate in the world. It's not highly published. We have a depression epidemic in this country that is going underground for many reasons, because people blame everything on poverty. We have a problem, a mental health problem in South Africa that is enormous. On top of that, which is interesting, and it doesn't take mental gymnastics to perhaps think that maybe if you look at the efficacy of exercise in helping people be more mentally well, we also happen to have the fifth least active adult population in the world. Far worse than the US, far worse than all the places that you can imagine are bad. The least inactive, I think we're in the Middle East, but we are fifth in the world, despite comrades, despite.
So again, you've got that wide diversity of the elite and the mass.
That's exactly.
Elite trainer, elite sports person.
That's exactly. So how do we get South Africa moving? That is my, when one goes up Platteklip Gorge on a Saturday morning, it's beginning to happen. You see South Africa there in the right way. South Africa is there, the entire country, not just a small group of people, not just the elite athletes, not just from a certain particular cultural or economic background. South Africa is taking to the mountains, but how can we do this much more deliberately, knowing how much nature heals and knowing how much movement heals? I think it's something that we're leaving on the table very often. It's something very simple that we can do. And the camaraderie I have felt in places where there's massive diversity. In Comrades, at that starting line, when it happened now, I ran Comrades this year. I stood there and we sang Nkosi Sikelele and the stem and the English anthem. I think it was a Zulu guy next to me. He sang the stem in a way that I cried like a baby. Just before I'm setting off on 90-kilometer run, it wasn't ideal. but in South Africa, we have this thing that can bond us so deeply. And we are leaving it on the table. There was not a politician that could touch us that day. We were South Africans.
And that's our rainbow nation when you actually look at something like that. Somebody said something the other day. We were at a conference in London, and it was a conference for Africa and investment in Africa. And the one South African panelist or facilitator of one of the things said, I've been accused that this is boring. So get up, everybody, and let's sing Shosholoza. So she got the whole room up singing Shosholoza before we all sat down, and then the panel did their bit. But if you think of that, how that changed so many people, because many Africans know that song as well, not just South Africans. So it was just really, so really beautiful. Good fun.
I've got goosebumps just thinking of that, because that's exactly. And of course, after the stem, we sing Shosholoza as well. Yes. And then they play Chariots of Fire.
Oh, lovely.
Yes,
that's such a beautiful song. Yes, that is magic.
But I'm just saying with Shosholoza, there were many, obviously because Comrades is also a very big international race, and all of Africa was represented. I think only people that didn't know Shosholoza were the Belgians. Perhaps. We can teach them. It's fine.
Now, one of the things I want to ask, it's personal, and I'm curious. You are extremely lean because of what you do.
Not so.
In a race that you did like this one now, what is the kilogram weight loss drop? Obviously, it probably recovers quite quickly because a lot of that is water and dehydration.
Yes.
So I was curious, what does that do to your physical body immediately? And the recovery period that your body goes through, does it get back to where it was?
Oh, okay. I can talk long about this, but
We've got a few minutes, but we don't have long.
A few minutes, exactly. So it's really interesting. I've fallen in love with the human body all over again. Our bodies are incredible, Sharon. It's in adventure racing. I talk at length about how one after 3 days is able to walk while sleeping. I mean, REM sleep, having a dream, sleeping like deep, proper sleep while walking. We are extraordinary creatures. The body, everything with the body. But so on that extraordinary note, one's body learns very, very quickly. So in the beginning, when I started doing these races, I would drop 3 or 4 kilograms on a race. So probably half of that is water, and maybe a quarter then of that is muscle mass that you lose because of the extremity, and then maybe a kilogram of fat. So if you have to split the 4 kilograms. Now, my body knows what's going to happen. My metabolic rate adapts. So it says, oh, she's going to do this again. Guys, hang on to every last morsel of energy that you can. My calorie burn output, my calorie burn rate literally reduces for the level of exertion. It is extraordinary. So what does happen, because you burn through the carbohydrates, I don't have a very high carb intake. So one gets into ketosis very early on in the race so that you can begin to use fat as resource. Problem on this race, because they're incredibly strict, they force you to carry 3.5 kilograms of food, whether you're a 120 kilogram man or whether you're a 50 kilogram girl. You're going to carry 3.5 kilograms of food. And I promise you, if you carry something, you eat it. So for this race, what I always struggle with is the ketosis comes much later because we tend to eat a lot more than we normally would on a race because they force you to carry, and they weigh your pack every day, make sure you didn't turf the food somewhere or give it away.
It sounds like a detention series that you go through.
It is a very, it's not very far from the army. It really feels like the army. But so the other thing is you don't lose that much. And the interesting thing is the body is so clever. When you get back to civilization, you gain back all the kilograms +1, sometimes +2, because your body now, if you just eat normally, goes, we're out of famine store because and there's a lot of stuff happening also with cortisol production. Yes. And how that then impacts the metabolism, fat burning, fat holding. But our bodies are incredible. It is all designed for our survival. You know, it's okay. So fashion wants us to be lean, but from a survival perspective, this idea that you are going to gain more and hold on to it much more. So it's these kilograms that you pick up afterwards are harder to shed than any kilograms ever, because your body has been wired now for physical trauma, or what can not trauma, but physical deprivation, I suppose, is the right word, or exertion beyond the normal.
We've got 2 minutes. What would you like to close with as a final message to those that are listening about why you wrote the book, or why they should change their lives? What final message would you like to share?
Do you know, Cher, I mean, the primary reason I wrote Run for the Love of Life is because I have seen how being physically active and sometimes pushing oneself beyond your own boundaries, out of your own comfort zone, whether that comfort zone is a 2-kilometer walk or whether it's a 200-kilometer run, it doesn't matter. But this idea of training your body, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, it has changed my life completely. It has changed how I show up in the world. It's changed my character. It's changed my career. My career took off when I started doing this extreme sport. my relationships improved, my friendships, it changes us for the better. If there is one thing that you can give your life, start moving. It doesn't have to be something dramatic. Actually, on my Facebook page, it's actually called the Thrive Run Club. I have taken 20 years of running experience, and I've built a couch to 3 kilometer, couch to 5 kilometer, and a couch to 10 kilometer program that is so easy. You can download it, get a buddy to start doing it with you. Just take the first step. Your life will only gain and benefit from it. That's the first message. The second message is, if you are older, it is especially important that you do this and that you never, ever stop. Menopause is not a reason to stop. It's a reason to start and actually just to keep going with more gusto than before. So that's, I think, my final closing.
I know why I felt a little irritated by the time I got to last night. I'd spent 3 days traveling, 4 days, where I'd been up at 4:30, into London, back close to midnight, up again at 4. And I hadn't done my very short train like a woman exercises. And I got to do them this morning, no matter how tired I was. I was going to get up and I was going to do that class. And she actually referenced our marathons. It was the first time she'd seen me live on a class since the marathon. Yeah. So all these things do all come together. And I have to say, by the time I'd done the exercise, I was far less irritable than what I was by the time I got home last night. So I have to say, I could personally also feel that drive to do it is so much easier if you enjoy whatever it is you've chosen to do. You need to do something that is aligned to your own body rather than just whatever you choose to do. So on that note, we've gone over by a couple of seconds. You have been amazing, Erica. I have so enjoyed chatting to you. This has been very, very special. And we have got a couple of messages that have come up of thanks that people have put up on the chat and on the Q&A. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. So when is the book going to get published?
The next one?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm only on chapter 4. I only started after Utah. So I'm hoping to finish the first draft in 3 months. Stephen King says 3 months and all of it is nonsense. Don't worry.
Yeah. So birthdays for next year, people know what they're buying. For next year's birthday.
No, I'm aiming for, yes, I'm aiming for mid next year for publishing.
Fantastic. We will watch your journey. And good luck with the next opportunity. The next thing you take on to push yourself beyond the boundaries.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Erica, thank you so much. And to everyone else, we appreciate you staying with us, and obviously come join us for our many, many webinars to come. And if you're in any of our chapter regions, please come and spend time face to face. Actually does work. We're going to get used to it again, but it does work. And to those that have given us messages, thank you so much as well. Erica, everybody else, cheerio.
Thank you, Sharon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.